Good evening, gentlemen. We're going to have a small talk on what's happening in Ukraine now at the moment. The Western press is jumping to a lot of conclusions that the Russians have been defeated. That's one. That Kherson's capture is the beginning of the end of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's something like what Stalin had mentioned, and even Winston Churchill had said after the defeat of the Germans at Stalingrad, that this is the beginning of the end. So they're talking the same way and comparing Kherson with what happened at that time in 1943. Now, what is the fact actually? Have the Russians been defeated? There's no doubt about it that the Russians miscalculated very badly and they got a bloody nose in Ukraine. No doubt about that. But the war is by no means over. And I think the Americans have realized the seriousness of the situation, because just about 2 days back, the chief of the CIA had a secret meeting at Ankara in Turkey with his Russian counterpart. Both of them came in their planes and they had a discussion, a frank discussion, and we don't know what happened, what was discussed, but probably the viewpoint of the Russians was heard, and the Americans also gave their own viewpoint. Now, what is happening in Ukraine? Russians still have about 18 to 20% of their territory under their control, mostly in the Donbass region. And the Russians are running short on supplies and resources. They don't know what to do further. I mean, they're at their wits' end at the moment. So they're resorting mostly to missile strikes, missile attacks. This is a very dangerous phase of the war, because the Russians are not even using their strategic bombers to bomb Ukraine, and most of their aircraft are not flying the skies over Ukraine, though they are supposed to have complete air superiority. That is because the Ukrainians have been given SAMs, the surface-to-air missiles, with the Americans, and these can bring down most of the Russian aircraft, which are of Soviet origin, really. So the Russians have started making use of their missiles and drones. A lot of drones have been shot dead also, have been shot in the sky by the Ukrainians. And Ukraine is suffering casualties. And the damage to Ukraine is tremendous. Vast areas of Ukraine have gone into darkness. There are power cuts. There are 80 lakh refugees who have entered Poland and the other countries, Hungary. And recently there was a missile strike, misfired by the Ukrainians, and it went and hit a Polish post and 2 people were killed. Ukraine has blamed this on Russia, but even Joe Biden has not accepted the Ukrainian viewpoint. So the war is looking like a war of attrition at the moment. The Ukrainians are making progress, but very slow progress. They took a long time to enter even Kherson because they were really scared that the whole city may have been booby-trapped. And I will say it is a victory for Ukraine to have captured the city back, with the Russians had captured a few months back. And the Russian failure to capture Kyiv and Kharkiv also rankles the military historians, because you can't understand what could be the reason. I mean, how did these people just fail? I mean, they just couldn't succeed. And that is very sad. I mean, it's something which nobody can explain. But I don't think, gentlemen, the war is over. It's just a pause, because now what is going to happen is that our good friend Vladimir Putin has to do something spectacular to build up the Russian prestige in the world. And let's see whether he's going to do it. He did attend the recent G20 meeting in Indonesia, in Bali. Maybe, there could be too many reasons for it. And even his foreign minister who went there didn't participate much, because he claimed that he'd got COVID, got admitted in hospital, came back. So the Russians were avoiding meeting there, though The G20 is not like the G7. G7 is a white man's enclave, with Japan as one member, and they keep on passing their own resolutions and theories. G20 is a much wider horizon, much wider group, and the net result has been that the Americans didn't have their own way there. And Narendra Modi also had a lot of say there, but Narendra Modi must be very clear. I mean, he's been abstaining in so many votes in the United Nations, and that is not the correct thing to do. Abstention has got no meaning. India must decide, bite the bullet. Either you are with the Russians or you're not with the Russians. If you're with the Russians, then you vote with the Russians. There's no question of abstaining. What are you trying to do? The West is not going to appreciate that you have abstained. They're not appreciating at all. They want India to vote with the West. Now what are you going to do about it? Nothing. So there's again a psychosis of fear. I remember reading Alistair MacLean's famous book, Fear is the Key. I think that's what's dictating Indian policy all the time. They don't want to antagonize the Americans to a degree. They don't want to annoy the Russians. So they're trying a middle path here and there, and that's not the way things are working. In politics, you've got to decide one way or the other. Put your eggs in the basket. You've got to back Russia if you want to. And if you think you don't want to back Russia, go with the Americans, and you know what the Americans are going to do for you. Nothing. Well, gentlemen, I'm talking of the war in Ukraine. It's not going to end. And I'm coming to another point. Now, as I've already pointed out, the Russians are using missiles more and more. And there is a possibility that they could use some more destructive weaponry. I have a hunch they're going to do it. They're going to shake Ukraine. They're already building up the tempo by telling the Americans, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They've been shouting, they've been doing it. And though the Americans don't expect it, neither Ukraine, but you never know. And if the Russians do use it, I don't think the West is going to retaliate, because that means the destruction of the West. Be very clear about it. If the Russians use one or small nuclear device in Ukraine, there can be no massive retaliation on Russia, because the counter-revolution would end in the destruction of America, and at least the small European countries which are chirping around so much like hens, they will just cease to exist in the world map. Gentlemen, let's wait and watch what happens. I think I'll close now, and all the best. Do subscribe to my channel. Think about it. Share with your friends. And I close now. Jai Hind. God bless you all.